Hi, I'm Steve Stedman, and welcome to this week's live discussion with Stedman Solutions. As far as the Stedman Solutions team goes, I'll be the only one joining today. Maybe next week or the week after, we'll get someone else to join in. But to start with, let's just kind of recap where we're at. This is our fourth week of doing the live streaming Q&A. And each week we open it up to anybody who wants to ask any questions about SQL Server. And we take a look at who's participating, and you can send me questions ahead of time that you want addressed, or we can get them submitted in the chat window during the whole session. So let's jump in. We only had one question submitted this week, but let's jump into that question. Where is it here? There it is. The question was, can I call a web service from T-SQL? Well, that's a great question because it's something that's really handy to do, and I actually do it quite a bit. When you've got a database application or something, or database, and you need to reach out to some system to either send data there remotely or pull data remotely, yes, you can do this, but there's not a direct, like SOAP or RESTful API type system built into T-SQL. So what you need to do is look at, okay, well, what is the web service? Well, a web service is really just an HTTP GET or an HTTP post that's going to format some data that's going out to a web server. It's going to read that data and send you some results back. Now, that might be an XML format, it might be a JSON format, or it might just be post data, depending on how you're looking at it or what the web service is expecting. So I do this quite a bit, and in fact, in 2021, we got hit with a windstorm and in our area, and the press was playing it out to be the biggest storm to ever hit the Pacific Northwest, which you got to kind of question that sometimes. But I thought, well, how do you rate how strong the windstorm is? Well, sure, you can have a wind. What's the term for it? I completely blanked on the term for the spinny thing on the top of a weather station. Anyway, you can have the wind speed indicator on your top of your house. You can judge the wind speed that way. But I thought it'd be really interesting to look at how many people are without power during this windstorm. So our local weather, not local weather, our local power company is Puget Sound Energy, and they had a website that showed how many power outages there were, and you could call a web service to get information on how many customers were affected by the windstorm and how many people were out of power. So I put together this web service call, and I've documented this all on my blog at stevestedman.com in approximately 2021. If you search on web service or PSE, you can probably find it. But I was able to do a web service call to do an HTTP GET to hit a specific URL and pull down data that with a specific set of parameters that told me how many people were without power. And then I was able to track that over time and see how many people were being impacted by this storm. Well, the interesting thing about it was, as I tracked it, eventually I lost power, but I was able to switch over. I had my computer and everything running on battery, and I was able to switch over to a generator and at least run on backup power until the local cable company that we use for cable internet, until they eventually lost, about an hour later, they lost the ability to provide internet to us. But during that time, I was using web service calls from T-SQL, running on a scheduled agent job to directly query and get information from the PSE website as to how many people were without power. It's something I do quite a bit, and I use in a lot of other areas. And with it, it's a pretty common thing. I've done it for customers, worked on different projects, and you can basically open it up, read a stream back, and once you get the data back, you then have to figure out, how do I parse it? And is it JSON, is it XML, or is it something else that needs some kind of specific parsing? It's a pretty handy thing to do. All right, well, that was the only question we had this week. So we'll roll right into what I call the SQL Server Comedy Hour, where we have some SQL jokes to talk about here. So the first one is, query walks into a bar, and this is kind of stolen from my SQL join types presentation, but a SQL query walks into a bar, sees two tables, and says, hey, can I join you? Well, the tables respond with, well, only if you're willing to commit. All right. Next, SQL query walks into a bar and sees two tables and says, well, where's the index? Okay. Some more DBA humor. I could tell you a replication joke, but I'd probably have to repeat it. And then SQL query says to its database, having you in my life is like having a primary key. It's unique and special. All right, well, this is unfortunately turned into torture here. And if anybody wants to ask any questions, I could certainly go into those questions rather than doing more SQL humor. But I might have to go into more SQL humor if we don't get any questions. So this next one, why did the SQL query go to therapy? Because it had trouble establishing meaningful relationships. Okay, so how does a database administrator break up with a table? Well, he just drops it. Why was the SQL Server table so calm? Because it didn't have any triggers. And this next one I didn't really follow, but it's just kind of, I don't know, a comment on database programming. It was, being a database programmer is easy. It's like riding a bike, except for the bike is on fire, and you're on fire, and everything else is on fire. Yeah, I don't really feel that way. I love doing database programming. So why was the database programmer always broke? Because he couldn't manage his transactions properly. So life is like a DBA, or sorry, let me do that one again. Life as a DBA is like a database transaction. You either commit or you roll back. Next, I could tell you a sharding joke, but it would probably just split the room. And after that, I could tell you a primary key joke, but it probably wouldn't be very unique. And the last one on the hour of pain, the SQL Server humor, is why did the DBA have such a great career? Well, he always had a backup plan. All right, well, that wraps up my SQL query humor for today. If you want to submit any questions, I'd be happy to answer those questions next week. When we do the closing here, there'll be a URL that you can submit questions at, or you can email them to me to steve@stedmansolutions.com. All right, that wraps up this week. Have a great day.